Hey everyone, good, let's see, morning, afternoon, evening, because we got folks from all over the world who are joining us for another installment of the Now of Work. And I am so excited about today for so many reasons. But today we're going to be talking about stopping that talent struggle. So, whether you are a leader who is struggling with your talent pipeline, or you are a professional struggling through your own progression in the workplace, this broadcast is for you. So, before I tell you about our illustrious guest who is joining us today, I first want to know where you're joining us from. So, if you would in chat, and I'm going to go over here so I can start seeing some of the comments show up. If you would in chat, just tell me where you are joining us from, and also put whether you're joining live or you're joining the replay. So, shout out to all my replay viewers. Every time we do this, we have a lot of people who message me or text or email like, you know what, Janae, I really can't join at this time. I have this thing, I have this conflict. No problem at all, because the replay is available to you. So shout out to all my replay viewers, and also shout out to everybody who is joining us live. So as you start to put in the comments, I see somebody says San Antonio. Okay, like down the street from us, because we're in Houston. Okay, so yeah, continue to put it in the comments so we can see where you're joining us from. But I want to make sure we go ahead and get started because there is so much to talk about today, and I'm really excited about our guest. Oh, okay. Hey, Josetta, joining us from Houston, Texas. So there's some others all the way live. Taylor is joining us from Houston, also live. Oh, wait a minute. I see somebody from Washington, D.C. Okay, D.C. DMV is represented. Okay. So we got some folks in the chat. And if I did not shout you out and you actually added a comment in LinkedIn, what I am doing today differently is I'm going to be watching on my phone too. Hey, Liz. Liz is joining us from Conroe, Texas. Texas is in the building. Uh-oh, ATL is in the building too. Okay, so we have people from all over. So I am super excited about this. I'm going to be monitoring on my phone too, because what I see often is I'll see the comments in our production studio, and then I'll go back afterwards and be like, wait a minute, this person commented. I'm sorry I missed you. I'm sorry that I didn't shout you out. So okay, so HMSDC. Okay. Listen, we just saw Antoine like what a week ago. All right. So thank you, HMSDC, for representing. I love that. I love that we have so much support in the building. And I am not going to belabor this point anymore. Please continue to tell me where you're joining live from, because I want to introduce our guest today. So our guest is none other than David Canada. And I do have some bio type stuff that I'll read to you like very briefly. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my connection to David. So crazy thing is, David and I both went to Howard University. David and I both graduated from Howard University 20 years ago. We are in our 20th year. In fact, this is a very special homecoming for us because this is Howard's 100-year homecoming as well as our 20th year. So we are definitely turning up in October. Just know that. Like, don't look for me in that third week of October. I will be in DC at homecoming. So what's interesting, and all of my NMSDC, HMSDC people will appreciate this, David and I reconnected last year at the NMSDC conference in Baltimore. And so it was interesting because I was like, wait a minute, I think that's dude from Howard. So long story short, we were able to reconnect. And since then, I have observed and watched David and how he moves intentionally and strategically when it comes to talent. What's interesting is that he is a global leader when it comes to supplier diversity. We could do a whole nother broadcast about that. But what I've observed of him and what I've seen has really been around the talent space, which is why I asked him to be here. one of the cool things about David, and obviously, if you know me, you know anytime I get to talk about my kids, I'm going to talk about my kids. So, because he has a mechanical engineering degree from Howard University, and because he has been able to move through his career at Boeing and also working for some other companies, and he is heavily involved in a lot of these talent development organizations, he actually is a mentor to my daughter, Anaya. And earlier this year, as she was preparing to attend the NSBE conference, I really watched how he reviewed her resume, how he had conversations with her, and how he coached her, really to prepare her to be ready to interview at the NSBE conference. And as a result, she is now on a full-time internship for the summer, paid, hello, money, paid internship for the summer. So without further ado, I would love to bring up David Canada. David, please join me on the stage. Yes, I love how my producer is on it. Like he said, money, and that's what matters. So, David, welcome.
Janae, so good to see you.
So good to see you too. So, David, I shared a little bit like high level about your career, but I would love for you to talk to us a little bit more about some of your career progression and also what do you do right now? Like, let's start there. Tell us what you do right now for Boeing, and then also, like what's the story behind it? How did you get there?
I mean, it's a 20+ year career journey, as you just mentioned, because we got a 20-year coming up. But when I
Mm-hmm.
graduated from undergrad, I worked in automotive. I worked at Chrysler, and I was on the launch team for like the Magnum, the 300, and the Charger. And I was like, this is a dope job. Like, I worked on the launch and the release for the first Chrysler 300C that we gave Snoop Dogg. So I'm
Wow.
like, really cool, right? But then automotive took a turn in like the 2007 timeframe, and I had a really good mentor at the time at Chrysler. He's like, listen, it's gonna get ugly. He's like, you can stay, you can look for something else. I would advise you to look for something else. Cool. So had some friends who had worked with Boeing, and they were like, man, you should try an opportunity over here at Boeing. I was like, I ain't really trying to move to Seattle. They were like, no, we got opportunities all over the place. Because it meant for a lot of people when they first think of Boeing, they only think of us building airplanes. So
Yep.
got the first offer from Boeing. It was in Seattle. I told them no. I'm like, can't do it. But then I got an offer in Philadelphia, and I was like, I can do Philly. Like Philly is not bad. So moved from Michigan to Philly, and my career has been on an amazing journey ever since. I tell people all the time, I've had probably 8 or 9 jobs in 17 years being at the company, and all of
Wow.
them were very intentional. Whether it be doing engineering work, moving into supply chain, leading IT for an organization, getting into management, then becoming an executive. The cross functional learnings that I had throughout my career really got me to the point where I'm at today of leading global supplier diversity for the company. And it's a unique situation because when a lot of people think of supplier diversity, we first have to dispel the myth between what global supplier diversity is and diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're
Mm-hmm.
completely different.
Yep.
However, one of the most important things and one of the most rewarding parts of my job is the fact that we have the ability to change the lives of just small and diverse businesses by working with them, mentoring them, and then enabling them to bid and successfully win contracts. Because for a lot of us, when we work at these large primes, you think about $1 million contract. You're like, that's like a blip, that's a nit. But for a small business, if we can say, I've gotten $1 million contract from a company like ours, it's life changing. It creates that generational wealth that we all
Mm-hmm.
are searching for. But more importantly, it gives them that credibility, if you will, that I can do this job and I can do this job well for other people. So when other companies are out there looking for them, they can be like, oh, you've worked for Boeing? You were a supplier there? Oh,
Yep.
well, that means you can handle the size and scale of the work that we're looking for. So it's an amazing opportunity. I'm blessed to be able to do it. I have a team of about 35, 37 people who directly support me, but it really is a blessing.
Excellent. So there are a couple of things I want to point out, but actually I'm gonna switch back to the wide view because I forgot something. So here's the thing: we have people who are in chat. If you see back here, I think I'm trying to point to it correctly. We do have a gift for whoever has the most engagement. So y'all, I recently published a book. I co-authored it with Lisa Nichols and other authors. And we're not going to talk about that today because, listen, I am worn out talking about that this week. But
Don't
I'm
forget, I
very,
still wrote my book.
yeah, David, I got you. I told you, I got you, signature, everything. I got you. You're going to get your book. But for anyone who engages the most, who has the most engagement today in chat, you actually are going to get an autographed copy of the book Rise Up, and it's a collection of stories. My story actually does start off talking about my journey at Howard University, and even beyond that. But it's a collection of stories about courage, about overcoming like life's challenges. Very inspirational. So I want to just mention that to whoever has the most engagement in chat. Our team will look at it and we will send you a book. And so, with that being said, David, I want to kind of go back to some of the things that you talked about in your career. So, first of all, you talked about how right now you have a team of over 30 people. Like, how are you leading and managing an organization that large with all the different moving parts? And as I understand it, some of these folks are recent adds to your team. So you absorb some more people, like you had a team of maybe 20 plus, and then now it's up to about 37. Like, how are you handling that as we talk about, this whole concept around leadership development and how do you really manage that talent?
No, I appreciate you asking because I have a very geographically dispersed team. Like I'm
Mm,
here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I only have out of my 37, 38 people, roughly about four of them sit here.
wow.
The
Okay.
rest sit in whether it be in Huntsville, Alabama, St. Louis, Southern California, Seattle. We have some in Houston. So geographically all over the place, right? But one of the things that's really helped me as far as just getting to know them and just building those relationships is being accessible. Like
Hmm.
I'm the type of leader who, when I get off of work, whether it be at 5 or 6 o'clock, I'm not one who's turning my cell phone off because I know I still have employees on the West Coast. And
Yeah.
they're cognizant of that because obviously with having a wife and kids and everything else, they're like, oh, we don't want to bother you. But I'm letting them know it's okay. Like you can reach
Hmm.
out, you can send me a message on Teams, you can text me if there's a problem, or you can actually call me and we can talk through things.
Yeah.
And to me, that helped break down some of the barriers. And then one of the first things that when I got on board with this team is I went out to all of them. Like I took road trips.
Mhm.
Like I went out to Seattle to meet with the teams. I did one-on-ones. And one of the things I asked them very clearly is I'm like, what's working, what's not working? From a previous leadership perspective, what do you need more of, less of, or what do you need
Yep.
done differently in order to be successful? And for a lot of folks, it was just like the question initially caught them off guard because they were like, one, people don't normally ask like a junior level person, what do they need to do differently? Or what does the organization need to
Yep.
do differently? And so got them to really open up, really to share, right? And then I'm just in listening mode. Like I'm not refuting anything they're saying. I'm just jotting all my notes down. And then I came back with just common themes of like, hey, I went to every site. I met with every employee face to face on a one-on-one basis. Here's some of the common themes that I've heard. And here's some of
Mhm.
my suggestions on what we should do differently. And then I work with my leads and my leadership team. I'm like, what do you guys think about this? And they were like, this is great. We should do this. Or they were like, oh, we really have some automation that we want to implement, but we don't know how. And I'm like, well, luckily, I used to be in IT and I was an engineer, so I can help you with these things. So
Yep.
it was one who was willing to actually roll my sleeves up and do some of the work to help them with some of this project implementation instead of just being the executive sitting in DC and being like, thou shall go do this. So the
Mhm.
accessibility is really important, but also the approachability. Because
Yeah.
I also think that one of the things that happens with a lot of executives is the higher you go, the more you forget to what it was like when you were an intern or what it was like when you were a new hire
So true.
and how the
Yeah.
decisions that you make day in and day out don't necessarily impact you or the people at your level, but impact people 5, 10 layers down on this train, and you're like, oh man, I never even thought about that. So for me, that accessibility and approachability is important, like to the point where I don't have people managing my calendar for me. Like I
Hmm.
manage my calendar myself. Like I'm
Hmm.
one who was like, if you need to get some time with me, let's get some time.
Wait, I'm
But
sorry. With a team of 37,
yeah,
because I don't have a team of 37, and you already know Liz manages my calendar because I'm not good at it. So how are you doing that? Like,
so here's the
I feel like
thing.
I'm slacking.
No, it's like, so for me, it's like the intentionality behind it, because
Yeah.
for a lot of times I'm like, listen, let's have a conversation. Instead of just
Mhm.
shooting me an email, let's get on the phone, let's get 10, 15 minutes. We can knock this out real time. And for a lot of my team, it was a culture shock, because for them, they were like, I'm not used to having a leader that's as approachable. But
Yeah.
with that approachability, the other thing I stress to them is that there comes a certain level of accountability. And
Mm.
they have a better appreciation of that now. Um, I always tell them, there's this quote that says like, accountability is the glue that bonds commitment to results. So when they think about it,
Wait,
I'm
I'm
like,
sorry. Can you say that again, David? Accountability
is the glue that bonds commitment to results.
is the glue
So
that binds commitment to results. I like that.
for them, it's like, if I know we want to change the way that we're operating, I need to do things differently, and I need to hold everyone around us accountable. So that's
Hmm.
what also has helped me with just building those relationships, managing the calendar. Now sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, and I got to call in some help. Like, so I have a person I can call if I really need it.
Yeah.
But it's really one of those things where people feel like they can reach out to me, they can get time with me,
Mhm.
and they appreciate that.
So first of all, I just need to say you have some fans, okay, in the chat. So I saw Ingrid Robinson, who is the president of HMSDC, and she said, "We'd love to meet with you when you're in Houston. We welcome the opportunity to support you and Boeing." So I'm just like, hey, Ingrid. I mean, I know,
Well,
look, I love that she's here and I love that she's engaging with you. So just know you getting shout outs in the chat, David. Like
no, I
you got
appreciate
fans
that.
who really are listening intently. So thank you to everyone who's joining. Thank you to everyone who's engaging. I'm seeing some really good conversation in chat. So David, I want to switch a little bit too, because you talked a lot about how you lead now and with your team, but I want to really talk about this concept of this talent pipeline and like
Mhm.
thinking about up and coming talent, because what we've heard a lot from our clients is they really are struggling either with succession planning, with pipeline development. And we know that there's been this scrutiny over the last probably 5 years or so around like, hey, who's up next? And we need to increase representation, particularly in underrepresented groups at a manager and above level, but we don't have anybody in the pipeline. We haven't been developing anyone. I've also seen a lot of companies try to fast track that, and it failed. Like we're just gonna promote people, right? Like we're just gonna put them, and because we got to hit these targets, and we know that we've been slacking on this, and it failed. But I want to share this example. One of the reasons why I really asked you to be on here and to talk about it from a talent pipeline perspective is because I've seen your involvement with all the various organizations that are focused around specifically developing diverse talent. And then, as I shared before, with Anaya, like I connected you with Anaya probably late last year, early this year. And she, for those of you who don't know, my daughter is now a senior at North Carolina A&T. And she was preparing for her first national conference with NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers. And she had no idea, like I had no idea. I couldn't really coach her except to say, like, hey, Naya, I'm gonna connect you with David. Like, he's good people. And I fully just expected you to, exchange a few emails, maybe a quick call, but you literally over time, over the course of several weeks and months, like met with her periodically, gave her feedback on her resume, coached her up on how to really position herself in these interviews, introduced her to other leaders, introduced her to people, like put her in front of people who really have influential, like decision making authority. And as a result, she is now in a full time. She's in a full time internship this summer. So my question is, first of all, like everybody listening, like please take a note of everything that I just said. Like it is a great example of what mentorship and sponsorship actually looks like. But David, where did you even get the blueprint for this? Like how did you get so passionate and so intentional about how you develop up and coming talent?
Well, I mean, I think it started like when I was up and coming in my career,
Yeah,
and I had people who were doing for me what I did for Anaya.
yeah.
Like that were really like when I got on Boeing, on board of Boeing, there's like this Black leadership network. I initially met them and they were like, listen, we're going to show you the ins and outs. We're going to show you the ropes. Like we're going to let you swim a little bit. If you start to swim, we'll help you. But I think it's a lot of times when people will come back and say, I can't find talent or the
Mhm.
talent doesn't exist. Um, One, I call them initially lazy, because it's true. Like a lot of
Definitely.
times they're looking in the same places that they've always looked, and
Mhm.
expecting the same results as you go forward, right? The second thing I often ask is like, where are you actually looking? Because if you told me, hey, I needed 5 Black engineers to work as an intern, I could find you 25, like
Right.
easily, because I know where to look. And the problem is they're not asking the right questions. They're just
Mm.
making the assumptions that a lot of these things just don't exist. And I think the other challenge we run into is when we get them on board, what are we doing to engage and incite them to make them want to stay?
Mm.
Because I'm finding, especially over the last few years, like there's a toll that's being taken generationally where you have more seasoned leaders and executives and myself that are very stuck in their ways. They don't want to do things
Yep.
differently. And they don't want
Mhm.
to accept the fact that this generation of a workforce is expecting something different. And they're looking at how you're managing your teams. They're looking at your org charts and looking at the diversity there and say, do I see myself playing a
Mhm.
role in this organization? And I think it's having the conversations and really being very transparent, being very direct, and also being at a point where it's just like you can call people out on their BS.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has helped me in my career is that I haven't had a problem with asking the right questions, to start sparking some of the conversations around what we need to do differently. And then it's
Right.
also a situation where when you're in a position to make an influence or make a change, like drive it from the forefront. Like I'm thinking about the fact that once I became an executive, right? One of the first things I was just like, how can I play a bigger role in our Black Employer Association? And now I'm
Mhm.
the executive sponsor of it, right? When you think about NESB, I've always
Yes.
been involved in NESB, but now I'm the executive sponsor for Bone's relationship with NESB. So it's
Mhm.
like thinking about the role that you're in, it's bigger than yourself. And it's like I'm always wanting to be a leader that one others want to follow, but I'm also
Right.
trying to train up that next generation of leader to where I can sit back and be able to say, you know what? I've made my imprint on these individuals. And it's never a situation where it's like I'm always pushing coming to work here because half the people I mentor don't work here. But it's
Yeah.
also about how can I create the next talent pipeline, the next generation of workforce that's better than what I was. And it really
Mhm.
helps when I'm at the conferences, I'm on the university campuses, that I'm one who's not just engaging with the faculty, the university presidents, et cetera.
Right.
I'm talking to the students. I'm finding
Mhm.
out what's working, what's not working. I'm asking them questions about what do you care about? Like, what's most important to you right now? And I'm feeding that back to my recruiters. I'm
Right.
like, listen, this is like this whole strategy that we're looking at needs to change for HBCUs because they care
Mhm.
about something different than your PWI. And here's what they're really asking about. And it's really driving that change up front. And when you're in those positions to make the influence and help drive the decisions, It's holding people accountable to get the results that you're looking for. So, like, I think about the fact that throughout my career, I've had people who help mentor me, and I still have people who mentor me now. But
Yeah.
one of the charges that they have is just like, how am I pouring that information that they're giving me back in the other people? So you take for instance with Anaya. When you introduce me to Anaya, I'm just like, yo, I got her. Like she's gonna be
Yeah.
good. Like walking her through the conference, like, and then making sure that people know, like, I'm helping her navigate the space. And if
Mhm.
there's a door that's closed that I know I can open, I'm going to open it for her and walk
Right.
her in that space and make sure that everybody knows, like, hey, I'm bringing her into the space. So treat her accordingly. Like, you don't just treat people like just randomly. So it's like when I
Mhm.
have more and more opportunities to do that, I do it. And I know that the students or the young people, they appreciate that because so
Yes. I
often
do.
people are like, they don't have like the grind and the grit and the hustle to be able to do it. And oftentimes I'm like, it's not just that. They're in a different space where they don't know how to build relationships. And
Mhm.
part of my job is to help them teach them to do that.
So it's so many things that you mentioned that I want to go back to. First of all, going all the way back to what you said about how there is a group of like senior leaders, and not just at Boeing, but every company where they're used to operating in a certain way when it comes to talent development, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to management. And one of the things that we really focus on in this series is how does that have to shift? The now of work means that there is no future. The future is now. Like, so the way that you led before does not work in this now, and especially when we talk about new generations coming into the workforce, new diverse generations coming into the workforce, and new populations, and what they expect from their leaders, what they expect from their company. But my question to you, like follow-on question to that, is what do you say to your peers or even to some people who are ahead of you in their career who don't want to change? They're like, I've been at this for 20, 25 years. Like, I'm good. I'm counting down to retirement. You want me to do what? Like, you want me to like actually have conversations with these kids at Nesby? Like, I'm not really trying to do that. Like, I've gotten where I am and I'm just fine, and I don't really need to change, or that feels like a lot of work. I don't really want to change. What do you say to them?
Oh man, it's funny you bring it up because I just recently had a conversation with one of our senior leaders. Um, and he went through this whole pivot in the sense of when we first started talking about like AI,
Mhm.
and we were talking about AI and blockchain and crypto and like all these various things. And he's like 67. He's like, dude, I don't care about that right now. Like, I don't have the capacity or energy to learn it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I told him, like, you don't have the energy to learn it because you're trying to read a book to learn it.
Mhm.
I'm like, but you know what? We got a bunch of interns over here that love all of this stuff and
Yeah.
have all the knowledge and resource they can share with you. But in turn, they're looking to learn something from you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you have the ability to do like a knowledge transfer. And for
Mhm.
him, he was like, he never thought about it from being a situation where he could learn from,
From the
say,
intern.
from
Yeah.
from an intern.
Mhm.
So I paired them together with one of our IT interns, and he pinged me back like 3 weeks later, and he was like, "Dude, this is all the new stuff I learned about AI." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." He was just like, and I didn't have to read a book to learn it. They were walking me through, they were doing screen shares. And I'm like,
Yep.
well, what did you give them? And he was like, I taught them about like not necessarily just financial literacy, but like as you grow in your career, how to use your money to make money. And he was like,
Mm.
they learn about it like theoretically in school. He like, but I was literally walking her through my portfolio. And here's how I'm using it to make,
Wow.
and I was just like, see, he was like, I need to do more of this. And he
Yeah.
was like, and other crazy thing is like, I need to talk to my grandkids now because they probably know some of this stuff and I can learn from them too. So I think it's creating opportunities where you can do that cross pollination and that cross learning, and
Mhm.
understanding that the intention is for both individuals to walk away being fulfilled, having learned something. Because a lot of times leaders will take on these meetings and they're like, they just want something from me. And I'm
Yep.
like, no, it's just like they want to learn from you first. And then you guys can
Yeah.
share ideas and things like that as you go forward. So creating those environment and spaces, because
That's so
again,
good.
I'm learning on the ground floor what our students can do. And I'm like, I can't do that. But I know
Right.
who can. Let me point you in the right direction. And then the relationships just grow and they become very strategic because now
Yeah.
it's like they're having these conversations. They're like, well, what else do you know? What else you do?
Right.
Do you know any other students who could do this? I need to
And,
talk to them
and
too.
you're building relationship with like between that intern and executive. Now there's like meaningful connection because there's been a mutual exchange of value between the
Right.
two, right? So the intern's gotten value from, okay, now I understand how to manage my money and how to really diversify my portfolio. And then the executive is like, wow, I now understand the fundamentals of Gen AI and like how I can use it in our business. And I didn't have to go take a class or read a book about it. So I love that as being an approach. And hopefully there are some senior leaders listening to this that maybe have already written off, like, I don't really want to do it. It feels like a lot of work, but they haven't really recognized the value that they get from it by engaging with that younger talent and how it really helps the organization overall. Because then as that intern moves into career, they're going to be better equipped to be excellent at their job because they've been mentored by an executive. I don't want to interrupt our.
Well, hey, Janae, one other thing I've seen that's worked really well for companies that are much more forward thinking is I've seen companies structure their intern projects
Mhm.
that's structured around that knowledge transfer and capacity building that goes both ways. So it's almost like they're creating an
Mm,
environment or a space
yeah.
for the project to be at the end of the day, I've taught you this and I've learned this.
Yep.
And when you start thinking about like if I'm an intern, I'm like, I want to do real work, like that's real work. Like you're
Yeah.
not just reading papers and creating like synopsises and things like that, or writing white papers. Like you're doing something that's transformational for the organization. And the other thing that we've talked about is how am I making an impact on that
Mhm.
organization? And this is a way of really being able to do that.
I want to make sure we get Ingrid's question back up here. So Ingrid asks, how do you bridge the gap with your younger employees to those that are more seasoned? So younger employees can help bring new ideas and solutions, but I find that they think they'll be a VP in a year. How do you manage expectations while providing opportunities to grow? That is a really, really, really good question because
Oh,
it's kind of like you connect them with an executive and they like, oh, bro, I could do his job. Like, I'm good. Like, I understand it took him 20 years to get there, but I can do it in two. Like, I love that question, Ingrid. But David, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. How do you manage that expectation, but also keep providing them with the opportunities?
I love that question because um, I recently had an intern, I won't say from what school, come to
Yeah.
me and was like, Dave, I want to do your job. Like, I'm like, when? He's like, when I graduate. So I was just like, all right. I'm like, so here's what I want to do. Like, I'm like, you're going to shadow me for a week. And I let them walk like a day in the life of like my job. And
Hmm.
he made it 2 days. He's like, I'm not ready. Because for a lot of people, it's about the title and the financial contribution. But what
Hmm.
they don't think about is the learnings that you have to have in place to be able to make some of these strategic decisions that impact an entire organization. And are you
Hmm.
willing to carry that weight of if this goes well, then great. If it
Yeah.
doesn't, it's on you, and you need to be able to explain the why. And if you think about, especially with the work that I do, working with our government customers, meeting at the Pentagon, all these other things, it sounds good in theory until they start dipping their toe into it. And it's just like, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was. And I think it's the exposure piece. Like I remember when I was a chief of staff, I told my when I was chief of staff for a vice president, I told my chief, I was like, look, I want to be an executive by 40. And she was like, okay. So because you're my chief of staff, I'm gonna show you what a VP like is like. And then you can
Mhm.
make that decision from there. Now, granted, it was one where I was like, all right, I could work through it, but I was just like, wait, this is way harder than I
Yes,
thought it was. And I
yes.
had to learn how to set boundaries. I had to learn what my own triggers were. Like I had a lot of work that I had to do on myself before I knew
Mhm.
I was ready to become an executive. But I think for a lot of people, they're not thinking about what they don't know or like the development that it takes to get to that level. They're just like, I know I can do that job. But it's
Right.
like you see it from a title perspective, but do you know everything that comes with it? So that exposure piece is important because the more you can expose them to them, they're realizing I can do it, but I have some work I need to do. Or it's like, you know what? I don't want to make the sacrifices that it's going to take to get to where I'm trying to get to. And it's okay.
And I think just what you shared in those examples, and Alex said, I love that so much. I love it too because a lot of times I see that even when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? So people will see like, oh, Janae, you have a company, you have a team and offices. I was like, I got bills, y'all. Like what you just said, these are bills. I'm responsible for not just myself and my livelihood and my family. And y'all out there, y'all know we got 5 kids. Like this is not a side business. This we are a two income family because we have to be because we got 5 kids and 2 in college. Okay. So my point is people look at that and they see the glamorous side of it and it's like the title or what they think is the notoriety and they don't understand the grind behind it. They don't understand what it really takes and it's not for the faint of heart. So in the same way that I say like entrepreneurship is not for everybody, being a CEO is not for everybody, having a team is not for everybody, having being an executive is not for everyone either. And there are some people who will take a different path. They will end up being a very high level SME, they'll hold patents, whatever, and not necessarily be in a people leadership role, which I've seen a lot of times in companies that if you're really good technically, then you kind of just get promoted because you're good technically, but you're trash when it comes to leading people.
Well,
Like
and
you
I
don't know
think
how to do that part.
no, and I think the other thing that you point out is that a lot of leaders, when you have a younger employee come in and be like, I can do your job, I want your job, they immediately get defensive or offended.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I take a different approach. I'm like, that's great because I'm not going to be doing this job forever. But let me
Right.
show you what you're really asking for. And then let's circle
Mhm.
back and see if you still want it. I think if more leaders took that approach rather than getting mad or being able to say, like, you rushing into it, it's like they could be rushing into it, but show them why their thought process is a little bit flawed. And I think a lot of people don't really focus on the why, they focus on the what.
Yeah.
I want this. And I'm like, I learned a long time ago that why is more important than what. Because if you only
Yes.
focus on the what can
Absolutely.
change the certain, like it's only going to change in that particular instance. But if you focus on the why, you can change the behavior of an individual. You can enlighten them in such a way to where they're like, okay, I know I need to do something different to get in order to get what I want. So I think that's something that, from a leadership perspective, we have some ownership and accountability on how
Absolutely.
we deal with those
Yeah.
situations when it come up.
So, David, as we were preparing for this conversation, my team reached out, got all of, your bio and also got like just, the basic stuff that we usually ask for our guests. But one of the things that you shared, which I was so impressed with, was you put together a document of your career journey
Mhm.
where it starts off from Howard University and it gives a visual of how you've progressed along your career journey. So I want to get into that a little bit because as I looked at that one, I know a bit about some of your background, but I know there were some moments where you felt very stuck, where you
Mhm.
felt like, yeah, nah, this ain't it. Like I'm not gonna be able to do it. Or like, wow, I didn't know that this is how it was gonna be. So can you speak to some of that? Like talk about, and really speaking to someone who may feel stuck in their career progression and maybe they have this aspiration of being an executive one day, but they are running into barriers or walls. So I'd love for you to share some of the, just high level, some of the stories of when you've been stuck or had like some very difficult moments in your career. And then also, what would you say to someone who is feeling like, wow, I didn't know it was going to be this hard, or I'm having to deal with difficult people, or I don't know how to move forward into the next step.
No, I got two quick stories on that
Yep.
that I can think of. So one was 2013. I'm an IT business partner supporting the Intel community, and I knew for a fact I'm ready to get into leadership. But I also knew that I was really good in the role that I was in, so much
Hmm.
so that my boss was like, he wasn't going anywhere. So I'm like, there's nowhere for me to go, but I know I
Hmm.
want to get into leadership. So I'm sitting up here, I'm having conversations with a mentor at the time. And sometimes the mentors can give you good advice. Sometimes the advice can be a little bit trash.
Right.
This time the advice was a little bit trash because I saw this role. It was a development program,
Hmm.
but it was based out in Seattle. And I was just like, I'm gonna apply for this program. And he was just like, man, that program is only for commercial airline people. You shouldn't go after that program. And I was like, yeah, but I'm gonna still go ahead and shoot my shot and see what happens, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't really know if I want to move to Seattle, right? So
Yeah.
I go home, I'm talking to the wife. I'm like, hey, this opportunity might apply for it. It's in Seattle. Her eyes all lit up. She was like, oh, that would be dope. We should move to Seattle. I got friends out there, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait,
Ooh.
hold on. I need to apply for this thing, right? But I'm happy. We were happy being in DC. So I apply, go through the process. There were 1,100 people who applied for this program,
Hmm.
and they only were picking five.
Whoa.
So they flew the top 10, 15 people out to Seattle, right?
Hmm.
Cool. And it was very weird how they did it because we were all there for an interview, but it was a group interview. So I didn't just interview with the program leaders. I interviewed with the program leaders, and then all of my competition was sitting there right in the room, right?
Hmm.
So I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna just put my best foot forward. I'm gonna be me, and that's gonna be that, right? So then get the opportunity, get the offer. Come back home, tell the
Congratulations.
wife,
Like,
wait,
that's
no,
amazing.
because there's another wrinkle in there, right? So I
Okay.
come back, tell the wife, I'm like, yeah, got this offer. Don't really know what I'm gonna do. She was like, you should take it. I'm like, are you sure? Yeah. So I accepted the offer, right?
Hmm.
A couple weeks later, she was like, hey, wanted to just tell you something else. It's like, yeah, what's that? She's like, I'm pregnant. Like, what you mean you pregnant? You know for a fact, if
You
I
got
knew
the
you were pregnant, I would not have taken this job. And she was like, that's why I didn't tell you. She's like, because I
Ah.
knew this would be a good move for you, and I didn't want the pregnancy to impact that. So we
Mm.
go to Seattle. But keep in mind, I don't have any family out in Seattle. Neither
Right.
she. And our son was born out there. And we developed a tribe and a community was there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I learned in that is one, having a supportive spouse is important. But
Hmm.
you have to be comfortable with taking risk, especially risk on the unknown,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable environment to stretch and grow. And
Yeah.
in that opportunity, I learned I did three rotations. One of them was a finance job, and I learned very quickly. I'm never doing a finance job again in my life, like ever. Like I will quit if you put me in finance. But I didn't know I would hate finance so much until
Right.
doing that job. But I think that's really important. And then I think the other thing that I found is when I first became an executive, I became an executive. I was running business operations and business transformation. I'm like, this is a
Mhm.
great blend between my business and my IT skills. All these, great job. That's what I thought initially, right? And then what happened is that the leader changed. And with
Mm.
the leader changing,
Yeah.
the direction of the organization changed. And it took me a very long time to know that I needed to pivot because the direction that the organization was going was more finance, project management based. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, that's not me. That's not
Yes.
why I'm here. But I'm fighting an uphill battle of trying to adapt to what they're looking for now, knowing these are things that I knew I wasn't initially brought in for. Like if you so I think what I had to learn, and this is a lesson that I take with me to this day, is like you have to know when to pivot. Like you have to
Mhm.
know that your time or your season within a role within an organization
Yeah, that's
has
it.
come to an end, and that you need to make a transition because otherwise you're just doing yourself a disservice. And for me, I had to learn that hard lesson because I was trying to prove something to myself that didn't need to be proven. Like I was trying to prove I could do this job. And it's just like,
Hmm.
you could do the old job. You don't want to do the new job. And that's why you're struggling. And I was just like,
That's really good. So you were trying to
"Uh,
prove something to yourself that you were like, why am I even trying to prove this? Like, I don't really have anything to prove, and I'm over here miserable trying to prove something.
exactly. And what it
Yeah.
really, the toll it really took is like my wife, the family, they all started seeing like me just like hate going to work. And they were like, that's
Mm,
not you.
yeah.
And I was talking to like one of my coaches, and she was just like, I don't know why you keep doing this to yourself. She's like, you won't even look for a new job because you're trying to prove them right. She's like, just leave. She's like, it'll all work itself out. And then I found this role, and it definitely worked itself out
Yeah.
completely. But if I would have stayed there, like fighting that fight, it wouldn't have been good for anybody.
Hmm. I hope everyone who's watching this and tuning in, whether it's on the replay or live, I hope you can glean those lessons from what David just shared because a lot of times we are fighting to prove something that's not really meant to be proven. And in the meantime, we're wasting time on something that's not even really for us. So hopefully that is helpful to people who feel like they are maybe at a crossroads in their career, and I hope that also helps leaders who maybe are mentoring, coaching, or developing someone who's at that crossroads to not give trash advice. Like your one mentor was like, oh, don't even apply for that. Like it's only for commercial people. Like, don't do it. Like, hopefully this is help. That part is helpful.
And Janae, I think one of the things that really helped, like, encapsulate it for me is that I was talking to a senior leader in HR about just my career and what I wanted to do, et cetera. And he shared with me, he said, the problem that a lot of people are facing, he said, is that they're not poor performers. They're performing poorly in the wrong role. And he's like,
Ooh,
you
hold
have
on,
to
hold on.
ask
Run it back,
yourself,
run it back, run it back, David. So you said they're not poor performers,
right?
they're performing poorly in the wrong role.
Right. He said, so you
Okay.
have to ask yourself, is it the role that's impacting your performance?
Yeah.
Or is it just you not a good performer? And he's like, you have a track record of doing amazingly well. He's like, and
Mhm.
then you see this downturn. He's like, and you know what caused it, and you're not changing it. He's like, so get out of the role that's no longer suited for you. And the other thing that when
Mm.
you think about from a talent perspective, like when I look at our talent across the board, and this would actually cause me to do a reorganization, I found people who were doing the wrong types of jobs.
Yep.
And so I was like, listen, I need to change how we're running the organization. And that caused me
Mhm.
just to do a massive reorg. And we're just about finished with it right now. But I want people playing to their strengths. Like
Yes.
I ask people, like, what is your superpower? Like, what are the one or two things that you do amazingly well that if you had to do it 12 hours a day, you could do it in your sleep? And I'm
Mhm.
aligning those types of roles, those type of opportunities to where they fit on the team.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing an uptick in performance, but more importantly, I'm seeing people be happy about the
Yeah.
work that they're
They have
doing.
some joy
And that's
about it.
most important to me. Like if
Yeah.
you hate coming to work every day, I need to find something else for you to do.
Yeah. And I see some comments in the chat. So Alex said mic drop. And she said that's happened to her a couple of times. Once they moved her, she did exceptionally well just by being moved into the right role. And David, you know a little bit about some of the work that we do at CTM Unlimited, but that part is huge. assessing teams to look at who is adding value in what unique way and how do they need to be positioned to collectively add value to the organization. Meaning like, hey, if I'm a data person and I'm really big on data, but maybe I'm shy or socially awkward, but I'm excellent at data and analytics. Don't put me out as the face of a project. Put me as the person who's going to do the analytics on the project, right? Like, let me be in that role. But if you put me out as the face, I still, most people want to do well at their jobs, like in general, right? So I'm still probably going to try, but you're going to see me struggle. And more importantly, if you have me misaligned with what my real value and skill is, then I'm on a fast track to burnout because my energy is drained every single time I have to do that thing that is way outside of where I actually add value. It's outside of my zone of brilliance. Like it's something else. And so quickly I'm going to turn into that person, like you said, where you don't even want to go to work. And that's not even you. Like you dread going to work or having that. I remember before I started the company, there were a few jobs I had on Sundays, Sunday nights, I would be depressed because it meant I had to go back on Monday. And I would just dread Sunday nights, like, oh, this means I got to see these people again. I got to do this work that I don't even like to do. I have to, whatever it was, because I didn't like my job. And so it made Sundays very hard for me because I didn't even like Sundays because Sundays meant it was almost Monday.
No,
And that's not, the Sunday night woes. It's a very real thing when you're in a role that you don't love or when you don't feel valued or whatever the case is. So okay. So David, listen, I'm looking at the time. I'm also looking at like there's comments in chat on my phone. I'm looking at comments in StreamYard. But I do want to do a couple of hot takes before we wrap up. Yes, Keisha said it's important to align people's strengths to the business. Absolutely. Okay, so a couple of hot takes for you. First of all, I've heard a lot of our clients talking about struggles with succession planning. Like they're just trying to figure out, wait a minute, we have all these people. Wait, I'm sorry. Before I go on, David, again, you got fans in the chat. Said, bring David back. I don't know what topic, but bring him back. Like just to talk about whatever. Alex, I hear you. I feel you. I thank you for that. And yes, David, we will have you back because we got a whole other subject to talk about ineffective supplier diversity people. Like we could go, we could go 2 hours on that. Okay.
Yeah,
so that's for another day. But yes, Alex, we will definitely bring David back. But I want you to talk to us about succession planning when it comes to a lot of now leaders are looking at, wait a minute, we have all of this talent that is retirement eligible. Maybe we haven't done a good job of doing knowledge transfer or developing the talent coming behind them. So we know we have a gap. And they're sitting in these kind of succession planning meetings at executive level saying like, okay, well, let's see who our high potentials are. What do they actually need to get there? What would you say to that leader who's struggling with that right now in 2024?
I'm trying not to get myself in trouble.
Yeah, nothing to get you in trouble. And you don't got to
looking. So here's what I would tell them. Stop looking for people only in your network. I think part of the challenge that people deal with when trying to build out succession plans is that they have not built up a big enough network to cast a wide enough net to find the amazing talent who can do the work. It's like they go to or talk about the one or two other leaders they work with. They're like, do you know him? Do you know him? Do you know him? And what you start to find is that a lot of these leaders all have the same people on all of their succession plans, which means you don't have a plan at all because only one of you guys are going to fill that role. But if you really started thinking about who are all the people I engage with, I interact with, that have expressed an interest that may be not ready right now, but maybe 1 or 2 assignments away from being ready, what am I doing to get them ready? Again, it gets back to that intentionality piece of it. Like I had to build out a succession plan for my role. It includes people who work at the company. It includes people who don't work at the company. And when I presented my plan, they were like, well, how do you know this person? And I started telling them, they're like, oh man, that's cool. Like we didn't know We could do that. I'm like, no one
Mhm.
told you you couldn't, but you just
Yeah.
stuck with, oh, I'm gonna go with these two, three people that's on everybody else's plan to call it safe. Like, I have people on my plan who absolutely don't work here, but I know could come in and hit the ground running because I've built enough of a network to have those
Mhm.
relationships. And I've
Yeah,
talked to
that's good. That's really good. And I think also just there what we see a lot of is, yes, if you look at everybody's succession plan, it's like the same three people on everybody's plan, right? So it's like, well, wait a minute, you got 20 open roles that you're trying to like determine who should be next. These three people are not going to go into 20 roles. Like, expanding it out and even looking outside of the company, but that does require you to actually build meaningful relationships with people. It requires you to have connection with them that is beyond the superficial. So I love that. Okay, so a couple more hot takes. One, tell me about. I'm trying to think about what, because I feel like we're gonna go off topic on this one. So tell me about this idea of developing talent, and what would you say to a leader who is struggling? Like, I mean, I feel like my people, they're not really performing in the way that they need to perform. Like, maybe I need to do some development with them, but I don't really know how to do that or the best way, or what I'm doing is not working. And more importantly, I want to retain them. I want to keep them, but I know that this is not working. What would you say to them?
um, seek feedback. I
Mm,
don't care if you do one-on-ones, if you do anonymous surveys, like whatever it is, like, or and even if you don't feel comfortable eliciting feedback,
yeah.
ask somebody to help you. Like a great example is I was just working with a group of folks that the leader of that organization was struggling to the point where all of their direct reports are like, I'm about to try to find other jobs, right?
Wow.
So they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we want to get some time in the calendar to just talk about what's going on. And they just did like a 30, 40 minute word dump on my desk. Like, it was to the point where I'm like, pause. Y'all said a lot. Like, each of you guys put like your statements in writing. I just want to understand. I want to read it. Right?
Hmm.
Cool. So they all did that. And then what I did is I gathered all that information, developed like some common themes and trends. I had a
Hmm.
conversation with the leader. I'm like, do you know that your people feel like you're a dictator? That they feel like you don't listen? That they feel like that your communication is in such a way that you're listening to not understand, but you're more so just listening to respond. And I'm
Mm,
like, and they were like, no. I'm like, have you ever asked them for feedback? And she was like, not really. I'm like, you need to sit down in a group of them and just listen. And I'm
yeah.
like, and bite your tongue when you're trying to defend yourself, because everything you say, you're not going to like. But I'm like, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. You want to understand how you're being perceived and then
Right.
ask yourself what you're going to do about it. But a lot of people shy away from having those transparent and vulnerable type of conversations because, again, everybody feels like they want to do a good job, but nobody
Mhm.
wants to hear, like, nah, in this area, especially when it comes down to managing people, you suck right now. But you need
Yeah.
to get that information if you're going to change because all you're going to do is start cycling through employees. And now you're going to be that leader that when they see a requisition posted, they call and they be like, "Hey, have you worked for so and so?" And then be like, "Nah, you don't want to go over there." And then you only got like two or three people applying for your job. So
I've
it's
definitely seen that happen. Yeah.
it's a learning experience. It's being vulnerable, but it's also just being able to like eat. As somebody told me before, like eat the meat and spit out the bones. Like you got to
Mhm.
take what from that conversation what you need to. Stuff that you don't agree with, that's fine too. But it's not
Yeah.
meant for you to argue. It's meant for you to listen. And the most important thing that you want to walk away from that conversation is that your employees feel heard. And that
Mhm.
changes the perception of things immediately. Because up until this point, they don't ever feel like you were listening.
That is amazing, amazing, amazing advice. David, we are at Brett. We have gone an hour.
Okay.
And and I love that you've shared so many nuggets. I want to just shout out to everybody who is still with us. So everybody who is still on our live. If you just put in the chat, I'm still here, but we are wrapping up. And I want to make sure that if there are any questions for David directly, that you go ahead and put them in chat. And David, this will also be available later. So if you want to hop on LinkedIn later and respond to people, you can. But I do want to just wrap up with this. Are there any calls to action around talent? Because we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about like the mentorship, the sponsorship. We've talked about developing your team. We've talked about receiving feedback as a leader. We've talked about all these different things. Is there one thing that you really want to leave our audience with, like in a call to action? And I see there's a lot of, like, we're cycling back through all the themes of what we've talked about in this conversation. But what is there anything that you want to leave with our audience if there was just one thing?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. It's lead with empathy and assume a positive intent as you go forward, and be accountable to yourself. Like, if you know that you can be better as a leader, like, do it. If you know that you can lead and develop talent in a better way, figure out how to do that. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I think a lot of leaders think of asking for help as a sign of weakness, but asking for help is a sign of strength and just leadership maturity. And when you recognize that, it's important that you do it and not be afraid to do it. So I think that's what I would leave folks with.
Yeah, I see some people saying they're still here. They still rocking with us. I love this. And I can say, David, even from, the conversations that we've had, and I talked about like the way we do our team assessments, even with you having this amazing leadership acumen, you were like, yeah, I need you to assess my team. Like, I want to make sure we're optimized, right? So being able to ask for help, even though you are an amazing leader, you are also giving an example of, this is how you do this. This is how you actually don't pretend like you got it all figured out. It's okay to ask for help. And you also want to continue to grow and be better. A lot of times we can plateau as leaders and be like, yeah, I did that. Built that team. Team is good. High performers. Cool. I'm good. Like, I don't really need to continue to grow and develop. And I think you've actually shown how there's so much value in continuing that growth and improvement and development. So thank you to everyone who is still here. I've seen some chat in the background with my team trying to figure out who's going to get the book, because I've been seeing like they lobbying for different people to get the book who engaged the most in chat. But I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to everyone who watched the replay. Thank you to everybody who's still here, rock with us an hour later. And David, thank you so much you dropped so many gems. I was listening and I was thinking to myself, like, I already know the team, they're going to eat this up. We're going to have so many like video clips featuring you, because there were so many sound bites of like things that you shared of wisdom. So I was like, don't worry, y'all. We're going to see plenty of video of David, because the team already like, oh yeah, we can use that. Oh yeah, we can repost that. And so we're going to get it. Well, my producer is crazy. But I love it. And Liz said, thank you, Mr. Canada.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were here. And is there any way, how should people connect with you? What's the best way to connect with you?
I think the easiest way is just right through LinkedIn. Like, connect with me, add me. You can message me there. I'm really good at responding there, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, very good. And for those of you who are joining us, if you want to know more about our company, and if you need help with building a legendary workplace and you need help with that team assessment and talent development, please contact us. It's down there at the bottom. That's how you get in contact with us. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there talking about whatever I feel like for the day, going on rants and whatnot. But thank you so much. Thank you for joining us live. And we will see you again really soon for our next installment of the Now of Work. Take care, everyone.